Good evening. I'm back with my book, The Phoenix and the Falcon. I'm going to be reading from chapter 2. When we last left Helena, she was in a village, a remote village on the steppes of Russia, what will become Russia, and it's by the Aral Sea, a big inland sea. This is an historical fiction novel. It's a dark historical romance. And a stranger has entered into their world. It's not a nice world for Helena at this point because she has been really marooned in this terrible village, and her only comfort is her young son. This book's available on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon. Also, I have a website, catherinegnewcomer.net, but Amazon's the easiest way to go. So here we go, chapter 2. I have to wear my glasses. The fire in the hearth burned low, permeating the room with the stench of smoldering cattle dung. Helena coughed, covering her mouth with her hand. Pulling it away, she stared at her slender fingers, now red and rough from chores, and remembered home, where her task had been to study her lessons, sew a little, and practice her lyre. Clenching her fist, she resisted the poignancy of memory. Instead, she focused on placing breads and sliced viands on the table with smooth efficiency. After pouring the mead, she waited near Mikhail by the fire. She glanced at the nearly empty fuel basket and briefly watched Ariana, Ludmila's youngest, and smiled. Ariana, Ludmila's youngest, had avoided her chores again. Ludmila would scold her in the morning, but would not stay angry long. Almost everyone indulged Ariana in one way or another. But Helena's expression grew somber as she wondered what the morning would bring. Leaning against the stone hearth, Mikhail rubbed his eyes. Suddenly, she decided to obey her heart and flee. Glancing at me, glancing at Mikhail. She reached for the worn, woven blanket basket and started to rise. If questioned, she could say that she needed his help to fill the splintering bin with fuel. "Come here, boy," Kansbar said, startling Helena. She flinched. Mikhail cheerfully ran to his father and crawled into his lap. With a happy sigh, he rested his tousled curls on Kansbar's broad shoulder and closed his eyes. Helena's heart sank. As Mikhail snuggled closer to his father, she became desperate. She considered telling Kansbar her suspicions, but discarded the idea. He would not listen to her, his youngest wife. Ivan, Kansbar's heir, shoved food into his mouth. 4 years older than Helena, he remained a petty bully, preying on the vulnerable. She could not imagine his response to her vague, uncertain fears. As all the men ate, conversation halted in silent appreciation of the meal. Maintaining proper decorum, Helena kept her eyes lowered and checked her desire to study the stranger. With a slurp, Ivan drank the last of his mead, then belched with a satisfied smirk. Kansbar stared at his plate as his thick fingers filled his mouth with food. Still, he kept Mikhail's head cushioned on his shoulder. Remembering Kansbar's brutality towards her, Helena found this quiet display of his affection toward their son almost unbearable. For her, it was far easier to hate a monster than a man capable of love. Ivan stole a quick look at his father, who remained intent upon his food. In a heartbeat, the younger man winked at Helena and soundlessly mimed a kiss. Disgusted, she refused him satisfaction of a response. She yawned, countering him with affected boredom. Had her circumstances been different, she would have laughed. He looked ridiculous, with his lips twisted in an expression resembling a pout more than a kiss. Despite her pretense of indifference, Ivan's unwanted flirtations revolted her. She felt no love for Kansbar, but she considered Ivan's behavior a betrayal of his father. Though younger than Ivan, she was after all his stepmother. Yet he was careful with his goading, making certain that Kansbar never saw, knowing all too well that his father would never believe her, a wife tolerated because of her rich dowry and the birth of a boy. Normally, she suppressed her hatred of Ivan, but tonight was different. Something about the stranger made her anxious. Already on edge, Helena found Ivan's behavior intolerable, yet she remained cautious. Kansvar ruthlessly punished any hint of disobedience. A quick learner, she had countless times bitten back defiant words in her struggle to maintain a semblance of docility. She held sacred the belief that one could bind her spirit. No matter the outside circumstances, within her own mind, she was free. Tonight, she had risked Kansvar's anger by bringing Mikhail with her. She did not care. She would escape with Mikhail or not at all. Avoiding Ivan's bold stare, Helena inadvertently caught the stranger's eye. She blushed. Her physical reaction both confused and shamed her. When his eyes sparkled, she knew he had observed her quiet resistance to Ivan. His intelligence and perceptiveness did not fit her judgments of the man. The realization troubled her, making it harder to see him as an enemy. Worse yet, something about him made her heart beat faster, giving her a fluttery sensation in the pit of her stomach. Examining him from the peripheral rim of her vision, she could not help but admit the barbarian was handsome. His blond hair, though long, was clean, glistening with red hues in the firelight. He was at ease with himself, calm and sure of his strength. She could not picture this man tormenting women to prove his manhood. Drawn to him, she wondered what happened to his blue eyes when he smiled. Helena reproached herself. How could she think anything good about a man whose presence might be a threat to Mikhail? She condemned herself as no better than Maga, reacting with her body rather than her mind. Resolving not to admire anything else about the stranger, she sat in the stool next to the fire. She positioned herself at his back, hoping to make him uneasy. Kansvar remained at the other end of the table, drowsy after his meal. Ivan pushed away from the table and sauntered over to the large bed. He leaned against the wall near its head and exchanged significant looks with Maga. She smiled and hastily rearranged her covers as if she had just noticed her ample display. The end result was the opposite, change in her presentation from immodest to flagrant. When Ivan casually sat on the bed, Kansvar lost his lethargy. He rose from his low stool, still holding Mikhail, and hissed at his older son. Get away, Ivan. Sit with the men or leave. Maga was his next target. As his voice became progressively louder, Helena pictured the wives on the other side of the leather wall hugging themselves with stifled out laughter. Kansvar had never shouted at Maga with such courage. You, woman, have you no shame? Cover yourself and join my wives. Mikhail awakened from the sound of Kansvar's reverberating voice. Mama, he cried out. Helena moved quickly to Kansvar, her arm stretched for Mikhail. Kansvar ignored her. Instead, he placed the boy on his bed and said, Go to sleep, child, all is well. At his gentleness, Helena felt her throat tighten with unexpected tears. She stared at the bed, her mind under siege by memories of her first night as his child bride, and clenched her jaw. Get up, Maga, Kansvar shouted. When dominating his women, Kansvar was at his strongest. He understood his position in his house, and to a lesser extent the village. He was the head of both, as had been his ancestors before him, tied to the cycles of planting and harvest. His father, her grandfather's friend, had been a man of vision who had reluctantly returned from his travels to assume leadership. In contrast, Kansvar never reached beyond the confines of his role. The village was his world, his protective shell. As Kansvar turned from Maga to the stranger, Helena sensed his uncertainty. Traditions were mute on night travel. The formalities had taken him through the offerings of food and drink. Now he was on his own. He sat with a heavy sigh, his back to Maga and Ivan. At last he directed his full attention to the visitor. Once more, your name? He asked in their Slavic dialect. Valimir, the barbarian answered. His voice was pleasant, well modulated. She could not place his accent. Valimir was the picture of relaxation, his back warm by the fire, his hand around a mug of mead. Helena experienced difficulty keeping vigilant against his magnetism. It was as if he was as relaxed as a cat, she angrily thought, ready to pounce on a mouse. But he's like the sun, warming me, a small voice whispered inside her heart. Despite her intentions, Helena became aware of his every move. Her heart beat with excitement. She stonily denied it. feeling guilty for betraying Mikhail, who was now sound asleep on the large, soft bed. Postponing her dismissal from the room, Magda sat up slowly, stroking her hand up the nape of her neck, and lifted her rich, dark hair. A few paces from the bed, Ivan watched. She smiled at him, then at Valimir, displaying sharp white teeth, but the light was poor, concealing most of Magda's show. Staring at Helena, she flung off the heavy blankets. They dropped on Mikhail and covered her face. Helena cursed softly in Greek, a language unknown in the village. Bitch, she said under her breath. Valimir stared at her, his face alive with curiosity. Helena noted his interest, but spared him no thought. She ran to the bed, worried that Mikhail might suffocate under the heavy furs and blankets. Her thoughts were cold with hatred for Magda. In a few strides, she reached the bed and brought Mikhail's head gently to her shoulder. His legs dangled to her thighs. He remained asleep, oblivious to the danger. Unaware of Magda's intentional carelessness, Kanzbar glared at Helena. "What are you doing?" he demanded. Overwhelmed, she had no words. She tried to think quickly, shifting Mikhail's weight to her hip. All the wives knew that speaking ill of Magda to Kanzbar meant a slow but certain death. The wives more than suspected that Magda was responsible for the demise of a rival the past year. The women whispered among themselves about her knowledge of poisons. Unfortunately, no one had any proof. Wisely, Helena never ate anything that Magda had touched, nor would she allow her near Mikhail's food. Magda sauntered over to Kanzbar. As she leaned behind his shoulder with affected nonchalance, her dress opened and exposed most of her breast to Ivan and Valimir. At this display, Helena's confusion turned to mortification. In many ways, she was still innocent. Magda's flagrant exhibition, using Kanzbar as a stage prop, created a situation that was beyond her. "Speak up, girl," Kanzbar shouted. "Do you need my hand to jog your memory?" Helena could hardly breathe. Kanzbar's next move would be to hit her hard across the face. If anything, he was predictable. Valimir cut the tension. "Do I have your leave to speak?" Kanzbar nodded, his face tight at the interruption. Valimir persisted, but his tone was mild. "I noticed that the other woman covered the child's face with the blankets. Perhaps the mother was worried that he might be smothered." Valimir's mother tongue was clearly not their local language. He enunciated his words more distinctly than any lifelong villager. Kanzbar stilled, his face darkening dangerously with anger. Helena had seen him fly into incoherent rages in the past after such withdrawals. Valimir spoke again. "Of course, it is none of my affair. Please accept my apologies if I spoke out of turn. Your hospitality has been more than generous." Shrugging his shoulders, Kanzbar allowed himself a small but tight smile. "Women, you understand, always a problem. But I thank you for your words. A good mother should be rewarded. Is that not so, Helena?" Kanzbar added in a more bantering tone. "Perhaps the time has come for Mikhail to share your attention with a little brother. I have to see to it soon." Magda pulled away from Kanzbar. Her sensuous mouth was sullen. She studied Helena with cold fury, calculating the next move in her deadly game. Sickened by the thought of relations with Kanzbar, Helena felt cornered and alone. Distressed, she retreated to the fireplace and cradled Mikhail against her slender frame. Suddenly her eyes met Valimir's. For a moment she found a refuge. He seemed to reach out to her as if he were lending her strength. Again she had the unexpected impulse to ask him for help. Her green eyes brightened with pain, and the words died in her throat. Ivan added to her turmoil. "Father, you joke. Look at your child bride. She's like a skittish colt. What could she offer you after Magda?" He laughed, but there was a cold edge to the sound. Helena's confusion lifted. Ivan had no right to speak of her with such insolence, especially in front of her father. She took 2 deep breaths and went to Kanzbar, her back straight with resolve. "May I have your permission to join your wives? This talk dishonors you," Helena said. Kanzbar stared at her with shock. Then he chuckled. "You are within your rights, Helena. Little could not have said it better. I see a hand on your training. I am pleased." With a sidelong glance at Ivan, Kanzbar continued, "Pray, wife, wait by the hearth. We may need more mead while I hear our guest's story more fully." "Ivan," Kanzbar commanded, "go outside and fetch more dung for the fire." Ivan exploded. The veins in his thick thick neck grew large. Me? That's women's work. Send her. He pointed with his strong but stubby finger at Helena. After a moment's silence, Cansborough said quietly, but with authority, "You are a disobedient son. You disappoint me. Do as I say. I don't send my wives out to the dark winds." Ivan whirled toward the door, cursing, but he obeyed. "Now, Valamir," Cansborough said, "tell me more about the Huns who attacked your caravan." Helena leaned back against the hearth, Mikhail heavy in her arms. His eyes were open, but glazed with fatigue. She slid down to her knees, placing him on the mat, and removed a small blanket from one of the shelves to cover him. She stroked his hair gently. "Rest," she whispered, stifling a yawn. The interplay between Cansbar, Ivan, and Maga had drained her. Fatigue pressed at her eyes. As Valamir told her his story, Helena listened, suspending judgment, wanting to believe him. He spoke of a large band of Huns who had attacked his caravan a scant day's journey from the village. Maga, who returned at Cansbar's side, gasped. The women in the other room were shrill with fear. Helena heard Ludmilla bring the group to order with a resounding "Hush!" The noise awakened Mikhail. He pulled his mother's sleeve. "Why is everyone crying, Mama?" "Because bad men are near. We must be quiet and listen." Upon closer questioning, Valamir said he had heard that one village to the east was unharmed by the Huns because they had paid them bounty. No blood was lost on either side, but he stressed, before describing his caravan where nothing remained but the dead. He'd been blessed by the gods to escape with his life, he said. But he blamed the caravan's guards. If they had not attacked, the terrible tradition of blood price would not have been invoked, as he again emphasized that the cost of spilling a single drop of Hunnic blood was annihilation. Helena's distrust returned, and she wondered why he kept mentioning a blood price. Ivan returned toward the end of the table. He slammed the door shut. Toward the end of the tale. He slammed the door shut. The wind seemed to sigh. He dumped the fuel near the hearth, spraying Helena with fine granules of dried manure. "You slut, you'll pay for this," he said in a low, vehement voice. "He talks of blood and prices. You'll know punishment when I finish with you. My father shamed me with your work. I saw you looking at this landless night rider. 5 years, never once did you acknowledge me, my father's heir. But for him your eyes grow soft. I'll teach you to look at another man. You've the rest of your life to learn respect." She hated him. Now goaded beyond restraint, her anger tore through her placid veneer. She hissed at him without thought of the consequences. "Go away, Ivan. You sicken me. Your wife's alone. Maybe in the dark you won't make her stomach retch." His mouth contorted into a snarl, and then it opened as if to speak. No words came out, only an enraged roar. The next instant, his fist found her face. Pain burst across her cheek and mouth. As she staggered at the impact, As she fell, she tried to break her fall with her arms, but her head hit the dirt floor. Her world became dark. Disjointed visions hit her all at once. Grandfather, her old nurse, the phoenix alive and looking at her. Shouting voices, loud and insistent, assailed her pounding head. More pain followed, this time in her stomach. Someone was viciously kicking her. "Stop! You're killing her!" Cansbar shouted, but did nothing. Mikhail was crying, sharp bursts of agony. Then there was movement in the room, and Ivan began to shout, "Leave me alone!" The agony stopped. Something in the room shifted, as if a breath of sweet air had come in. She heard the sound of a fist as it punched deep into Ivan's stomach, followed by a crack to his jaw. A tooth broke with a pop. Helena opened her eyes as Ivan fell to the dirt in a heap. She hurt too much to feel the satisfaction of revenge. Instead, she whispered for Mikhail. Cansbar spoke softly to the crying child and carried him towards the women's side. He motioned for Maga to follow, who for once obeyed without comment. "Ludmilla, attend to your son who clutters my floor. Ariana, care for your little brother." Mikhail clung to his half-sister, who held him close, though Ivan's full sister, Ariana, was Helena's friend. Cansbar turned to Valamir and shook his head with puzzlement. His left eye was twitching. "Ivan wouldn't have killed the girl. But he doesn't discipline my wives. That's my place. We never needed a stranger's help in our quarrels. But for once I'm glad of it. He wouldn't stop hitting her. I don't understand this." Valamir, breathing audibly, said nothing. His expression was grim. Cansbar spoke in a voice he reserved for the younger children. Helena, sit up, girl. You've been hurt. She tried to obey, but as she moved, the blood drained from her face. Her breathing was shallow. She lay still. Cansbar lifted her gently and carried her to his bed. No, she said, not here. Helena, please, Mikhail needs me. You must rest. No one will touch you. Sleep. Helena grabbed Cansbar's shirt with her fingers, all at once remembering something important. She tried to pull him closer so she could whisper in his ear. Please, Cansbar, listen. Hush, child, your head's been hurt. Lie still. As Cansbar laid her down, she became desperate. Please, this man, he's more than he seems. Yes, he is. He's a wonderful fighter. I've never seen anybody knock out Ivan with only 2 blows. With urgency, she whispered, and more, Cansbar. I felt at the start something was wrong, but didn't understand. Don't you see? Volodymyr is an Ostrogothic name. What does that matter? Remember my grandfather, Cansbar. He taught me about the world and its people. At the mention of her grandfather, Cansbar backed away. A furtive expression played across his face. You babble, Helena. Enough of this. Sleep, he commanded. He moved to return to the low table, and Helena panicked. She started softly, but it ended in a shout. Ostrogoths were conquered by Huns 50 years ago. They're pledged allies. Then the stranger's voice filled the small room as he shouted in an alien tongue. Knowing the rudiments of Gothic, Helena understood the words as he shouted, Men, come to me, assaulted her as she slipped into the darkness of chaotic dreams. And that's the end of chapter 2. So next Monday, I'll read chapter 3. I hope you're enjoying it. We're still in lockdown mode, and I wanted to share my book. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you. I'm going to check the Facebook, see if anybody said anything on Facebook. But you never know. So if you think about having, if you want to ask me questions, you can next week. Let me see one thing. So no questions. So as you can see, things aren't going well for Helena. I look forward to sharing more next week. Take care. Bye-bye.